So how's it going, Jake?
Hey, it's going real good, Randy. How about
Good.
you?
Yeah, real good. So you've had a really good season so far. You contacted me about the season you've had and some of the factors that went into you shooting some nice bucks this year. And so yeah, we decided to put this webinar together and maybe help some folks understand some of the factors that make deer move and feed.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially
Yep.
in these high pressure states that you and I hunt in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think a reoccurring theme that we hear from a lot of landowners is, it's the second day of firearm season and seems like all the bucks have disappeared off the property and, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And you've known me for a good long time. We've known each other for a long time. And if I can say anything about my style, how I go about deciding where to hunt, when to hunt, it's pretty strategic.
Mm-hmm.
And I always weigh a lot of factors.
Yep.
And but proof's in the pudding, right? I had a great season again. So
Yeah. Sure did. Between the two bucks combined, you must have put something like 260 inches of bone in the freezer.
yeah, yep,
Something like
yes, I
that.
did. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's not
Wow.
bad.
Another great year. So,
Yeah.
so what we're going to do then is we're going to go through the factors that make deer move and feed, but then at the end of the webinar, we're going to kind of talk about, if somebody really wants to take their property to the next level and have the kind of hunting experience late in the season or even right in the middle of the season, well, what does it take to do that? Well, at the end of this webinar, we'll go through the steps that you really need to do if you want to have a property that can hold deer, where you can see a lot of deer, even if you're surrounded by brown and down hunters like you are.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's good because for people watching, listening to this webinar, so many of the things that we're going to talk about here and the experiences I've had this season didn't happen by accident.
Mm-hmm.
It was years and months in the making to get there.
Yep.
And so I want people to understand that this isn't a quick fix, but it is a great way to go if you want to be consistent.
Yeah, and so why try and reinvent the wheel yourself? I mean, why not use what's already been proven and tested, and it absolutely works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, just in case there may be some listeners that haven't ever heard about us, if you want to just talk a little bit, Jake, about what you do and maybe where your property is located, so people kind of have an idea where we're coming from.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, I'm Jake Illinger. I've got 67 acres located in northwestern Lenawee County, and that is a southern border county in southern Michigan. All the way to the south is the state of Ohio. I've had a land management consulting business for nearly 20 years now, and I travel throughout the Midwest, but primarily Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, helping out landowners and hunters in developing long-range plans so that they can be more successful in not only holding deer but hunting those deer and harvesting them. So yeah, it's been something I've done for a long time, and I've got years and years of personal experience that kind of built my inventory before I started the business. But I've been a crazy deer guy all my life, and still to this day. They're freaking awesome. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in every kind of habitat you can think of, I've dabbled in at one time or another. So
Yep. Yep. And so, I'm kind of come from a little bit different perspective in that, instead of me having my own property and having worked on that one property for many years to do a lot of testing, I was taking the public land route and, knocking on doors. And so, I've hunted a lot of different properties. And I guess what I really love to do is to walk on a new piece of ground and identify what the deer like to do, how the deer are using the property, and then come up with a plan to, capitalize and put an ambush on during a hunting season. And so I like to do that a lot on public land down in Ohio, Michigan, up north, and that type of thing. And then, me and you got together, man, several years ago, and what I saw you were doing on your property really took the habitat side to a new level. Since then, we've been doing the same thing, right? Like you said, traveling around the Midwest
Yep.
and helping guys set up their property and how to
Yeah.
ambush these big bucks.
And the greatest thing is everybody's got a different perspective, and you see things from what makes Randy Randy. Well, you spend a lot of time knocking on doors, hunting public land, hunting small pieces of private, but through that you learned a lot of neat methods that work to set up that parcel to be very successful at hunting it. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do, is see the deer and hopefully tag a few of these target animals that we're hoping we can get up close to.
Yep. So
Yes.
yeah, you're on the east side of the state in Michigan. I'm on the
Yep.
southwest part of the state, and not too far apart. But yeah, it's southern Michigan. I think we can both agree is a pretty tough place to consistently shoot a mature buck, because the amount of hunters per square mile in southern Michigan, I mean, dwarfs what's going on in northern Michigan, and probably one of the highest hunted areas to hunt, per mile than almost anywhere in the country, I would think.
It really is. I'm glad you mentioned that, Randy. And if anybody was to look at Google Earth in southern Michigan, the first thing you'll notice is there's a patchwork of agricultural fields. And so anytime you see hunters per square mile, you got to realize, well, maybe that square mile, 2/3 of it is picked bean field. Well, there's nobody hunting out in that. So
Exactly.
it condenses, let's say it's 12 or 18 hunters per square mile, or 30, or whatever region you're hunting in. Out of a 680-acre section, there's only 180 acres of fence row, swamp, marshland, and woods. That's where everybody's at.
Mm-hmm.
So it really puts the pressure on these deer.
Yep. And
And
Michigan's got a hunting culture that goes way back, and pretty much anybody that's into hunting, they want their kids and grandkids to get into hunting. And so if you got a property owner that maybe has 40 acres, 80 acres, not only is he hunting it, but maybe his kids, his brothers, grandkids, brothers-in-law. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of people that can get packed into some of these woodlots.
it really is. In some ways, it's remarkable that these deer make it, isn't it?
It really is. They really got to go through the gauntlet. And
Oh
I think
man.
that's where you and I have been fortunate to see a lot of different properties around the Midwest, and really see the difference on how deer in Michigan react and how extreme they go to just survive the gun
Oh,
season.
they do. Yeah.
I mean, you can tell the difference. It's much different in Michigan on how deer behave and get away from hunters than it is, say, in Missouri.
Oh, absolutely. And Missouri's got a hunting culture and a pretty active gun season, but they don't have these weeks and weeks of season like here in Michigan has.
Yeah. And they
And
got bigger parcels out there too.
they do. Typically a lot of those guys. I mean, sure, I've worked on some 60-acre Missouri parcels, but I've worked on a lot of properties in Missouri that were 1,000 acres or more as
Yeah.
well. So I
Yeah.
mean, you just imagine having 1,000 acres. Jeez.
Oh man. Well,
Yep.
hey, I think here in a couple months, you and I are going to be working together down in Pike County, Illinois. So that'll be fun, huh?
It will. Yeah, that's awesome that we have an opportunity to actually work together uh, to bring our ideas and our expertise to benefit a landowner. So yeah, this will be really fun, Randy. I can't
Yeah.
wait to do that.
Yeah. I know he's excited, and yeah, so
Yep,
are we. So looking forward to that.
that'll be
So,
great.
yep. So I guess then what we'll do is, we'll start right into, we'll kind of go through what some of the key features are needed for great daytime deer movement. The one thing that you can attest to is, low hunting pressure, man, it just makes all the difference, especially, on a high hunting pressured area like where you're at.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most difficult things I have to communicate with any client that hires me to develop a plan and help them with hunting strategies and entry and exit and all the different habitat improvements is when I get down to the conversation about them and how often they hunt their property. And it's an uncomfortable conversation for some people. They say, "What do you mean? You mean I can't hunt my property?" They kind of give me that look. And I go, "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But you're going to have to hunt differently." And low impact is exactly that. These deer do not like human interaction. They don't like pressure from people. And as soon as you start showing up where you haven't been showing up, they have an equal and opposite reaction for that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think some landowners might confuse a local farmer on a tractor He's out there all the time and the deer don't mind him. So, what's the big deal? Deer don't
Yeah.
care. But that diesel tractor is never going through their bedding areas.
No, it's
That
not.
Farmer Joe is out in his field on the tractor. Farmer Joe's not walking through the bedding areas,
Yeah.
or, that's a apples and oranges type of situation.
It truly is. That's something that they've grown up with since they were a fawn, and they do not recognize that individual, that kind of uh, interaction as a negative problem. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be like that first year and a half old buck when he gets a strong scent of a human, and then somebody shoots at him and he survives. That's going to teach him volumes in survival at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah. And I think the one other thing I'll just quick say about that is, you hear a lot of people talk about, well, the deer get used to it or the deer don't mind it. But, there's a big difference between the deer and that 4-year-old buck that people are targeting.
Oh boy.
It's not even really the same animal, or you can almost say it's not even the same species.
It's not. I've been fortunate enough to kill a handful of 4.5 and older bucks on this small farm. And often I'll get into these types of conversations with a client, and they'll say, and I will say, well, that's not a good place for that tree stand. And here's why. Well, I see bucks out of it. And I go, well, what kind of bucks are you seeing? Well, typically if you break it down, they're seeing 1.5s, maybe 2.5s. Well, that's not the same deer. That is not a 4 or 5, 6-year-old deer. Okay.
Nope.
Nope.
No.
And they just do not take chances.
Right.
I think they're staying alive is their number one priority, even
Yep.
during the rut. They just don't take that chance.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think what we all see on the Outdoor Network in Iowa and Kansas, where most of these TV shows and videos are filmed, is, it gives guys like us in Michigan a wrong sense of reality. And, we just can't take what works in Iowa and apply it to Michigan. But you can take what works in Michigan and apply it to Iowa, and it'll work every time.
Exactly. Yep. I don't know how many times you and I have kind of shot the breeze, and I'll tell you about, I was out to Iowa and I was working on this property, or I was in Kansas, and those deer just seem to not care about people. They don't have a fear of people. I mean, I'm telling you, I cannot walk back into my property with 2 guys standing next to me talking in the edge of a food plot and have a 120-inch buck walk up 30 yards away, put his head down, start feeding.
Right.
He's out of there, But I've seen that in Kansas and Iowa and northern Missouri, and they just don't have that. They don't get the pressure, so they don't see humans as a predator like they do here. Yeah.
Very few times do they ever experience any negative consequences.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. And then, so number 2, security cover with multiple bedding locations for local deer. And wow, this is one that I think is greatly underestimated by a lot of landowners. And when we say multiple bedding locations, we're talking about segregating the sexes. We got doe beds, closer to food, but then we got isolated beds that are in thicker cover, that where the deer where the big bucks want to hang out. They want to go back to their man cave, get away from the women and kids. You got to have both of those really on your property.
You do, and a lot's been, social media is awesome, but the term food sources, food plots, and bedding areas it's a broad brush. And if you break that down, people have to understand that different times of the year, under different wind directions, under different weather conditions, deer are going to prefer to bed in different locations for those reasons. So when I use the term multiple bedding, I'm talking about dozens and dozens of locations for doe family groups, and dozens of secluded hideaway locations for bucks. And that doesn't mean that every one of those locations is full of deer, but it's an option for those deer to use when they need it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a typical landowner, he's got 30 acres, he's got he's got some tillable, he's got some food plot. Well, I got a bedding area over here, and I got food source over here, and that's good and great, and you're on a great start. But we're going in a lot thicker. We're opening the layers quite a bit deeper on this. Okay,
right.
when we use that term multiple bedding.
Yeah, exactly. And, really the same thing as far as food sources go. You got to have multiple food sources, because, man, if you've only got 1 or 2 really big food plots, or maybe a field edge or something like that, and food source gets compromised by a hunter, going to his stand, maybe from his stand, and even if it's in the dark and they blow deer out of there, you're left with a pretty desolate food source the rest of the year. So having,
Yeah.
especially small food sources that, this sounds pretty strange and kind of hard for a lot of landowners to accept, but it's something that sometimes these really small food plots, you can only hunt it 2, maybe 3 times a year under the right conditions.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think you got 7 acres of food on your property, but I mean, deer hardly ever know that you're even
Yeah.
in a blind or a stand when you're hunting
Right.
it.
I only hunt. I only have hunting locations on 2 of those food sources.
Yep.
And I hunt them very light and under the right conditions. And I have everything from what I'm going to say larger destination plots to tiny little micro plots that don't even make up 1/10 of an acre. But I tell you, those deer are using them every day. And
Hmm.
and that's the best part, to step into that layer of the kind of hunting that I do is you need to have bedding and food sources that you're never ever in, except during the off season when you're improving them and taking care of them and doing some work in them.
Right.
So, the guy that has the 6 or 7 small micro food plots should not have 6 stands on those micro food plots. He should
Exactly.
pick 1 or 2 of them that he can successfully get in and out of once or twice a year, and then capitalize at the right time of the year on that shooter buck or big doe or whatever it is. It's in his goals.
Yep. Yep. And generally that means, box blinds that are off the food plot, not right on the edge,
Yep.
or
Yep.
extremely brushed in so well that
Yep.
you can't see them. And
Or
especially
hiding the heck out of them.
yeah, you can't see, deer are not allowed to see you get up and down the ladder.
Oh,
And yeah.
yeah. Gosh, we've seen a lot of that, haven't we, Randy?
And the guys that really, I mean, I would say the guys that have their stands and their box blinds right on the edge of a food plot are the ones that are really struggling
Yes, they are.
and are the most
Yep.
frustrated. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
pretty easy trend to see there, huh?
Yes, it is.
And then last one, obviously you got to have some water sources. And
You do.
yeah.
It's good to have water. It's amazing how much they use it. There's no doubt that during the summer and early spring, summer, and early fall, there's a lot of vegetation that holds moisture in it, and deer can get water from that. But once things start frosting, and now nothing has moisture in it, they've got to find some water. So
Hmm.
swamp, wetland, river, creek, and hey, if you don't have that, then there's other methods to create water sources. Commercial tubs, guys that cut plastic 55-gallon drums in half and lay them on their sides. There's all these creative ways to have water on your property. And once those deer find them, they'll use them.
Yeah. And the funny thing is about your property, I mean, you got a lot of water on your property. You got a lake on one side, you got flooded timber,
Yeah.
and you've got just real little water holes on the side of your food plots, very secluded, and the deer will still come on the food plot and walk right over to that water source.
When I first started doing it, I thought, well, I'll just see what happens here. But my gosh, these deer got water everywhere. And it just goes to show, they are lazy. And as long as they're in the food plot and there's a nice little water tub over here, they just walk right over and drink out of it.
Hmm.
And pretty. But it tells me something that they like to have water when they're eating.
Yeah. Convenience factor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like our convenience gas station on almost every corner,
Yeah, that's right. Stop and get a coffee too, right?
So as we move into the natural movement factors, we got about 5 of these here. We're just going to run through these here real quick, and then we'll get into a little bit more detail when we get through them. But, by far, I think we can both agree that the number one movement factor that we always pay attention to is a post-cold front.
100%, Randy. That's
Yep.
all I look for.
Yep.
In hunting, especially early season and late season. It's all about post-cold front.
Yep. And that's when, you get you got some warm weather, the front moves through, it gets really windy, blustery, there's some rain involved. And then as soon as that passes and skies clear up, the wind dies down, the barometer's going up, the temperature is down, and it's a nice calm day. Normally, it's a blue sky, and man, if you can couple that with a northerly type wind, oh man, that is a time to be in a tree, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
Yeah. So then we got moon position, and just want to clarify, this is not moon phase. So as soon as somebody says moon position, right away they're thinking full moon, new moon, but that's not what this is. This is actually where the moon is as far as overhead, underfoot, rising moon with a setting sun, or a setting moon with a rising sun. You've been following this moon position more than what I have. So, you're going to talk about that more later, but,
Yeah.
I've been paying attention to it more since you've been calling my attention to it. And yeah, it's something that I am really, want to pay attention to in the future. And it's amazing what you have done this year in regard to that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Yep. And then running activity, obviously, and this would be, toward the end of October, into November, and then reading the stage of the rut. And we'll get into that a little bit, but there's a different hunting style that needs to be employed at the beginning of the seeking phase, than there is, say, in the middle of the lockdown period.
Yes. Yep. And so it's very beneficial for you, the landowner, hunter, lease owner, to be able to read what stage of the rut are those deer in before you go in there and pick where I'm going to hunt and how I'm going to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have a lot to do with your success.
Yeah, and definitely the way you hunt during the rut in any phase of the rut is much different than how you hunt, say, at the beginning of the bow opener. October 1, October 2, or if you open up in September sometime. Boy, that is a totally different hunting style then than
that
it is
sure is.
during the rut. It's
It
amazing.
is. Yeah.
Then we got predators pushing deer around. So and not only is that coyotes and bear and wolves and whatever you have out there, it's also hunters too pushing deer around.
Yeah.
And then the last one, balanced age structure in bucks creates competition and then more movement activity. So to have a balanced age structure on your property, means that you got to have some of those components that we'll talk about here in a bit. But you've got a really balanced age structure on your property, Jake. I mean, here you've got a small 67-acre property, and a lot of it is your house and your barn and garage and that type of thing, and then you got a bunch of flooded timber. So I mean, really huntable ground. You have not much more than 45 acres, but still
Right.
you have multiple mature bucks living on your property, and the amount of movement as a result on your property is unbelievable.
Yeah. It truly is. And being I was there in the beginning when there was none of this, okay, and was learning and making mistakes, and to see where it's at today, it's pretty amazing once you've got an age structure, how much daylight activity takes place by bucks of different ages because they're curious about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we put in here, it creates competition. They are very competitive. They want to be the first one to that doe that's coming into estrus. And the more things that you do to your habitat and the better that age structure is, the more daylight movement you're going to have on that property, which ties into natural movement factors.
Yep.
You can
Yep.
now hunt one of those moon positions I was going to talk about under the right weather conditions, because it may not be an ideal rut period, but we've got bucks around curious about what the other guy's up to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So then we go back around to the very first natural movement pattern. That's the pulse cold front. And so this is a screenshot of a typical, well, not maybe typical. This is a pretty good one right here. So this is a screenshot taken off of weatherunderground.com. And we'll show you the link here in a second. But, I think, Jake, me and you, we check this thing daily, don't we?
Oh, gosh. I just I check it a couple, 3 times a day, especially early season, because, you can just see, and you'll go ahead and explain it, but from that graphic, you can see exactly the conditions that a hunter should pay attention to pick what day he should hunt, not that I'm going to hunt these 3 days. You need to know what day am I going to hunt. Okay.
Yep, exactly. So unfortunately, maybe for some guys who, their job doesn't allow them to take off any time, so they've got to put in there for their vacation, maybe 6 months ahead of time. And, hopefully there's a post cold front going through at that time. But, if there's guys out there that have the ability to pick and choose when they hunt, man, this 10-day forecast is just, it's money.
It is.
And so for instance, here we got over here on, this is September 30. This is from this past hunting, well, this past September and October.
Yeah. Yep.
But here we've got 85 degrees on Monday. We've got 80 degrees on Tuesday, and from there, the bottom drops out. It's just on a downward slope until you get all the way to Friday. And so by Friday, you get a high of about 47 degrees. So that's about a 35. Do the math real quick. I mean, that's about a 30-degree drop right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
very significant in basically about 48 to 72 hours.
Yep, exactly. And during that drop, you have a bunch of rain. You can see about 100%. So we've had about 24 hours of rain. And if you look down here at the bottom, this would be the wind graph. And you can see that on Thursday, man, the winds are up to over 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, she really blew on Thursday, didn't she?
Oh.
As that front was moving through.
Yep. And you just know that during this time, these deer are going to be on their bellies because they're just hunkered down.
Yep, they're hunkered
their
down
senses
tight.
don't work very well. They can't really smell, keep themselves out of trouble. And so they just stay put. And man, when it breaks and it's over, the rain's done, the wind's calmed down, the barometer goes up, the temperature's down. Now they got to feed. And boy, Friday morning was just incredible.
Oh yeah, and look at that wind. It's a northeasterly wind. So I mean, it's perfect.
Yep, they had about 6 miles an hour, so almost calm.
Yep, settled right down. And those deer were all over Friday morning.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Not all cold fronts are alike. I mean, some cold fronts are better than others, and I think the more blustery it is on the way down for the temperature, the better it is when it comes out of there.
I would agree with that, Randy. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the magic window right there. If you can't hunt that morning, that evening's still a great hunt too. Because the pressure's up and it's stabilized. It's actually kind of flatlined right there. Mm-hmm. So that's very important to watch for that high pressure.
Yep. And the wind is still, less than 10 miles an hour.
Yep.
And it's a northerly wind. So here's another one. Yep. Here's the other one from October 24. So a little bit different. This was, we had a temperature of almost 60 degrees. And then within about 24 hours, it dropped all the way down to just under freezing.
Yeah.
And, the barometer's right up there. The temperature is down. And you can see, we had winds over here of around 10, but it wasn't that blustery, crazy wind with a lot of rain like it was earlier in the month. Yeah,
it was a little short front is what it was. But a pretty significant temperature drop.
Right. Yep. And the winds were down around 2 to 3 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So, And you can see, too, it's partly cloudy and sunny, which is generally the case.
Yep.
You can see here we've got almost 60 degrees on Sunday, but, you really don't have that drop off of temperature. It just kind of up and down. And the barometer's really not climbing here. So anyway, so, how do you get to this? Some guys, they want to see this and say, hey, this is a great idea. I want to check this out on my computer or on my phone. So the way you do it is you just go to Weather Underground. I would suggest if you want to do this on your phone to not use the app, because the Weather Underground, they do have an app, but the problem with that is you can't customize the settings. So just go to, your browser on your phone, whether that's Chrome or Safari or whatever, and just go to the weatherunderground.com website, and it works much better than the app does. And there's not many sites that I can say that about, but it is true on this one. And so when you get there, you just want to make sure you put in the city that you're going to be hunting. And then you want to go scroll over to the 10-day tab. And then when you pop that tab there, this will open up and you'll see the next 10 days. But then you'll have this blue customize button over here in the top right. And this is how you can get rid of all the other information that just clutters up the whole graph. And then when you click on that, then what you're going to see is this little drop-down box pop up. And almost all of these are going to be checked automatically. That's the default setting. So you can go in and you can uncheck all of these other ones. You don't need cloud cover, dew point, and feels like, and all that. It just this chart gets to be so busy, you can't even see what's what. So basically all you need is chance of precip, pressure, temperature, and wind speed. And that's all you need to find out when's the best time to hunt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this happened to be a pretty good one too. This is a pretty good temperature drop off and
Yeah.
high
Yep.
pressure and
Pressure's coming up. So there's 2 times in that graphic. You got the Saturday morning is pretty good, and that Wednesday morning's pretty good.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was last year, but about a year ago.
Yep.
So now we get into moon position, and Jake, have you talk about how this is different from the moon phase.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, the moon is on it's not on a 24-hour cycle. I think it's 24 hours and 48 minutes or something like that. So wherever that moon is right now, when you and I are talking, where it's at in the sky, and I haven't looked at the app to see where it's at, but wherever it's at today, it's not going to be there tomorrow at this exact time. So that means every day that moon with a position in the sky is in a different location. And over the years, many people, many hunters, way before I got interested, started paying attention to that moon position and its influence in deer and animal movements. And then there's some people have like a lunar table for fishing, but that's more about tide structure, but it does deal with gravitational pull. But often you hear people talk about moon majors and moon minors, and moon overhead, directly overhead or underfoot, completely around the other side of the planet, directly underneath us, that's a moon major. Theoretically, it's a little bit closer than when the moon is rising or setting, so it has a stronger gravitational pull. And for myself, the one thing that I've keyed on over the years is, deer are crepuscular animals, meaning they typically move a lot during that first hour to hour and a half, and that last hour to hour and a half. So if you want to see noticeable deer animal movements, because of the moon, it has to be outside of what I call that peak movement period. So we're going to get into later talking about some of the hunts I went on this year that took place during mid-morning and early afternoon. And that's when I see the best effect of this working for you. It's not an absolute. There are so many things that can happen that we as hunters can't control. So just because you give it 1 or 2 shots and it doesn't work, don't just scoff it up. It takes years and years of following and watching, but I have found that it's in addition to the weather conditions, I like to add if I can have a favorable moon position too, then I'm going to dial in on that day, that late morning, that late afternoon. So, as the moon rises, a lot of times, depending on what that moon phase is in, that can be it can be at 10 o'clock in the morning instead of right at dark. And so there's all these different factors involved, and it can get very complicated. And so for anybody hearing this and who's not very aware of it, don't let it get too complicated, because it doesn't need to be. I hope that opened up some of the answers for people.
Yeah, I agree. And when you can combine the moon factor along with a post cold front during the rut, I mean, when you have all these things lined up, man, that's when you want to be in a tree. And so it really is a matter of stacking the influences to increase the percentages in your favor.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of us that have that 40 acres, 30 acres, we're in Michigan. We've got brown and down all around us. So we know if we enter an area and we're taking a risk entering that area, we want the odds to be as much in our favor as possible. And, and you've known me long enough, Randy, and you've seen what my hunting seasons are like. And I've killed several bucks when not only was it the right time of the year and the right rut phase, it was post cold front and the moon position was right. And when did I kill him? When the moon was right,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so because, a lot of those factors don't line up very often, that's because that you don't hunt your property. You don't hunt that number 1 food plot very often.
Right. Yeah.
Because you wait till these things have all stacked up. And
yep, I do. I wait for everything to line up. And if it's not there, I'm just not going in.
Yep. And so that's why 2-week long firearm season in Michigan, extreme pressure. I mean, you've had neighbors wound some of the bucks that you've had on your trail cams.
Yep.
And I mean, you got some extreme pressure around you, but yet those bucks are not going to be on their food plots across the line, but they do enter your food plots on your property because you're hardly ever there.
I'm not there.
You know,
It's
you
it's
know when
the
to stay the heck out.
it to them it is a secluded area they can go during daylight and feed.
Yeah.
And that's that's the goal, is to create that utopia.
And that is probably one of the hardest things that you and I have to convey to landowners, that overhunting is probably the worst thing that you can do.
It truly is. There's other states where you can hunt the same exact stand 13 days in a row and finally kill that target buck. I'm not going to say that can't happen in Michigan, because sure, there's no absolutes. Anything can happen. But year after year after year, I'll tell you, if a guy owns 40 acres and did that for 10 years in a row, he would not kill that buck 10 years in a row by hunting it for 14 days in a row.
Not in Michigan.
So no, not in Michigan.
Right.
Nope, they're gonna figure out he's there every day, and they're gonna avoid him.
Yeah.
So,
very good way to put that. So the moon position, we have, like you were just saying, a rising moon with a setting sun, a setting moon with a rising sun. Now, you were saying that mainly happens with a full moon, Jake?
it does. If you look at it, that happens around a full moon, a few days before, during full moon, and a few days after. But it doesn't take long, and pretty soon that rising moon now is after dark. In the beginning, it's before dark. And there's no doubt that when you have, if it's the rut and you have rising moon, and anybody that's setting a stand in late October, early November, and sees that yellow, pink, orange moon coming up through the timber, and it's still daylight, man, it can be magic. All of a sudden, bucks are grunting and does are moving, and it can be awesome. And same on the opposite side. In the morning, you can have a setting moon with a rising sun and have just as great deer movement. So don't discount it. It makes that early morning and that evening hunt that much better. But if you look at it, I think it's about 3 days before the day of the full moon and 3 days after, and then it's just outside of that cycle.
Okay.
So it's a short window. And again, for those people that take vacation 6 months in advance, it's hard to pick these things. Okay.
Right.
But there's lots of apps and places you can go look, especially for moon. You can look ahead 2 years from now to see where the moon's going to be on November 10th.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Exactly.
We
point.
can't predict the weather.
Nope.
That post cold front that we're looking for, but we can pick exactly where that moon's going to be on a specific day.
Yep, exactly. So one thing I wanted to throw by here, and that is, so let's say we have a full moon that's rising, and it's really good deer movement that evening. Now, if it's a clear night and the moon is bright, and it's almost like almost like twilight all night long, right?
Yeah.
Now, have you found that first thing in the morning is not as productive as if it were cloudy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I will agree with that statement.
Okay.
And,
all right, good, because that's what I've noticed too.
And what I have found over the years is that rising, or we'll say we're going to have a setting moon that following morning. Okay. But what that means is sometime around noon, 11:30, 12:30, you're going to have a moon underfoot. Okay. And that's midday. And because the moon was so bright all night and those deer were moving, and there's just a lot going on because of that close, bright moon, that can be a really good time to hunt.
Yeah, right.
During that midday. Of course, it's a non-peak deer movement time period. And, when you talk to many hunters and landowners, we don't find a lot of guys that go out at noon. They talk about it, but how many guys do it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. No, I'm glad you've noticed that same thing, because that kind of reaffirms what I've noticed as well. Okay, so now guys might be wondering, where's the best place to find these moon position websites or apps? And so you have found one that you've relied on.
Best Hunting Times. I do really like that app. As you can see, that's the one all the way on the left-hand side there. And so it will tell you, like on Saturday, November 4th, 2017, it gives you, they measure how good a day. So it's a $6 day, meaning it's excellent. And then they give you some major feeding periods. And they're going to tell you that, 11:23 p.m. through 1:23 a.m. Well, that's dark. Okay. So you can't hunt that. But that 11:51 a.m. through 1:51 p.m. is a very good movement period for that day. And then you've got some minor, and the minor would be rising, setting, and a major is going to be overhead or underfoot.
Right.
And then right there in the lowest part, it tells you the moon phase. It tells you when that moon rises, when that moon sets, and when that moon is directly overhead or directly underfoot. They call it transient.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you 12:23 a.m. is probably moon overhead because we had a rise at 6:30 p.m. So that means about 12:23 in the afternoon, you're going to have it directly underfoot.
Yep.
And that's a strong. So that's why they've got the that 11:51 to 1:51 p.m. as a movement period, major feeding period. So I've had real good luck, to answer your question. I use this app a lot. Along with watching the 10-day forecast and watching that barometer and that post cold front, then I look ahead and say, okay, where's the moon going to be? What's the good time? And this year, this has worked out extremely well for me, and it has for several years. It's not just this season.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so you found that app on Google Play?
Yes, I did.
Or the iPhone store?
Yeah, the iPhone store. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because they do make it for Android too.
Yeah, and it's not very expensive. God, I'm thinking it was something like $3 or $5 or something. It's not much. And if I don't know, have you recently purchased it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that about the right? I bought mine several years ago, so I'm not sure, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And then so you're on one screen. You can scroll over to the calendar. It gives you the phases and stuff. Yep.
Yep. You can look at and that's kind of nice too.
Yep. And then you can look ahead.
Yeah.
You can look next week, next month, whatever, right?
Yeah, and you've got weekly views, and that's all at that lower bar at the very bottom of the app.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then of course you get right into weather too. So it's a pretty cool app for answering all the questions that you need. It just doesn't have that 10-day for you to look at.
Right. And so once you put in your zip code, it remembers your zip code, and then that's how you get the the moon phase or the moon position for your area and along with the weather.
Right. Yeah, that's the most important thing. Be sure to put the zip code of where you're hunting.
Yeah. You don't want to be hunting based on Colorado or something.
Yeah, definitely will set you off time wise.
Oh yeah. So man, it was really cool, Jake, to kind of follow what you were doing this year, because many times you were sitting in your banks blind, secluded banks blind. You can see there's a pine tree, white pine over here to the right. You've got one on your right, you got one on your left, and
and the blind is tucked right in, and then brushed right in, and my entry and exit is it's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You've told me many times that you would come out to the backside of your banks blind, come up the ladder, you peek over all the cover that you have, the brush in front of that blind, and there'd be deer feed right out in that food plot.
Oh yeah.
You were able to get in, open the door, get in, shut the door, and they don't even know that you got in.
They don't know I'm there.
No.
And it's careful because number one, they're fairly close. They're 35, 40 yards away from you, and just a little bump noise, but you just take your time, don't rush. Eventually they put their head down. You kind of peek your head over the window. Okay, he's got his head down. Now I can shut that door, or whether it's does, fawns, or bucks. But yeah, I just love hunting this location. You can see how secluded it is. We've got all kinds of bedding to the north where you can see all those conifers with the snow hanging on it. There's just lots of natural bedding. 100 yards from there is all kinds of hinge cut bedding. To the east is all kinds of great natural bedding, different tree species and early successional growth and hinge cutting. So there's just a lot of bedding all the way around us, which makes getting in and getting out extremely tough. So I've got very good manicured trails, quiet trails. And again, if the wind's not from any northerly direction, I just don't hunt this location.
Yeah, because these big pines here are on the north side of the food plot.
Yeah.
Yep. So, You know what I really like about this too, Jake, is when it gets into that December time frame, it gets really cold. These deer are bedded underneath
Oh,
these pine trees because of the thermal cover.
yes, they're
You know,
right
but
up in there tight.
but what I really like about this situation is you've got all these autumn olives right out in front, and
Yeah,
so they cannot see what's going on in this food
they
plot.
can't see. Yep. And
Yep.
I love having that thickness. And I go in there every few years and, you know, cut back on those autumn olives and some of the multiflora rose just so it continually stays at that 6 to 8 foot tall level, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
just killer.
Yeah. It's a,
Yeah.
so, so that happens to be Tuesday, November 12th.
Right.
And if we look over on that Best Hunting Times app, it told me that there was a major, and if anybody can remember, that was the first big snowfall that had come to Michigan, and we got about eight plus inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to, clear my driveway and my sidewalks, and I've got some older parents around the corner, 3/4 of a mile away, and I went and cleared off their driveway and sidewalks, and they, said, "Oh, come on in for a cup of coffee." I said, "Oh, I can't stay." I said, "I'm going hunting. I got, you know," and so you can see we had a major feeding period from 11:10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Okay, so that's dark. So I can't hunt then. But
Mm-hmm.
that 11:34 a.m. to 1:34 p.m. it's like, okay, this is right around noon. So I don't know if I text messaged you or what, but I
Mm-hmm.
said I'm going to try and get in there by 11,
Yep.
and I did. I got in there by 11, and I mean the hunt was it doesn't get a whole lot better than the hunt on that day. And I didn't know what to expect. Normally I have soybeans in this field, overseeded with brassicas. I had a failed soybean crop this year due to drought and mare's tail. And I came in here in late July, disked it all up, overseeded it, and planted with my brassica, turnip, radish, uh, crimson clover, a lot of different stuff. It did very well. We got the rains. I overseeded it with rootstock rye in mid-September. Everything grew awesome. So I didn't know what I was walking into. And of course, I go in there and everything's just covered in snow. And I'm like, oh, but I can see deer tracks, I go, okay, yep, there's, the snow just quit 6 hours
Mm-hmm.
ago,
Right.
but we got deer tracks in here, so I think they're feeding. So I was very very excited about the hunt. I thought, man, this is going to be great, because we have basically a moon underfoot at 10 minutes after 12 that day, and
Okay.
that's going to influence a lot of deer movement. So this is, I would say, this is peak rut. Wouldn't you? If you're going to say the rut's on, man, this is it. It's November 12th. It's just before gun season.
I
There's
would
a
say that it would be the peak rut as far as when they breed, the lockdown period. You think?
Yeah, yeah, and especially this year.
Yeah.
It came a little early and it was quick.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, normally you don't hunt a food source during the rut, but based on the weather and everything that set this up, post cold front, high pressure, deep snow and cold. I can't remember how cold it was that day,
Oh.
but it was in the teens.
Oh yeah.
So I thought, these deer are going to be coming to food. So based on those instincts, I went in and sat in that bank's blind, and there's my picture that I sent you. I said, well, I'm in. Here's what it looks like.
And so this is a really clear picture here because you had opened the window when you
Yeah,
got
I
in. You
opened the window.
first thing you did is
Yeah,
you took a picture.
yeah, I took a
Yeah.
picture.
And then now you're settled in and you close the window because you don't want your scent to get out. And
Right.
so now you're taking pictures through your window that is you're having a difficult time keeping unfogged.
Yeah, it's fogging up on me, and it's just, it's just part of the bank. The bank's blind is an airtight blind, and if our body temperature is 98 degrees, I've got my breath. Plus, it's tight, and there's moisture that comes out of our body. So eventually, you're going to get condensation on these windows, and it's a lot of it's work to do to keep those windows clean.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to do the best I can. So I'd cleaned it a few minutes, and then here comes some, a couple of does and fawns, and just look at the size of those brassica leaves she's munching down. Huh?
Yeah, and even though you got all this mare's tail growing down here, no big deal.
No big deal.
You're not fretting over the few weeds that are in your plot.
I'm not. There's a lot of great green food in there, and of course, when you plant in July, it's still warm, so you're going to get weed competition, but there's nothing you can spray on it to get rid of those weeds. It wouldn't kill all those brassicas and the crimson clover, so I don't worry about it.
Right.
And you can see right there is a spot where my seed coverage was a little thin, so the weeds got established.
Yep.
But hey, it's all good.
Yep. You bet. So, yeah, I mean, here's another buck. I mean, this is so funny. You know, this is like, what a pig, man.
I remember I sent you a picture, and I think this was right at the moon underfoot time period, wasn't it? It was right at like 10 minutes after 12.
It was unbelievable.
And I said, "Oh, Randy," I said, "right on cue. Here's my first nice buck of the day coming in."
Unreal.
And he comes in and he fed for 10 or 15 minutes, well within range. And I said, nope, he's got short brow tines. He's a nice deer, but I was just soaking in how much fun it was to be out there hunting.
And this is not happening on your neighbor's foods plots. I can guarantee you that.
I know that. This just doesn't happen. And where all that pressure and the guys that are wounding deer, because they're out there all the time and they're not good with their scent control, this was not happening over there.
Nope.
It was happening here instead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool.
And I saw piles of deer that day. And look at the size of that boxcar doe. I took that picture and
that is.
Remember I sent it to you. I said, look at this big gal. You know?
That's a Boone and Crockett doe right there.
That is. And that's what I figured. I got right up close, 10 yards of a Boone and Crockett doe. And yeah, it was a great hunt. Didn't kill anything. Really just wanted to observe and see what was going on. And the greatest thing about doing this hunt, based on number one, weather conditions, time of the year, the big snow event, and then I watched the moon and I said, I'm going in early, and here's why. Imagine how many guys would say, yeah, it's great, it's snow, but I'm going to wait till about 3 o'clock to go in. Still got 3 hours before they'd have missed the whole thing.
Yep.
So
exactly.
So what this does, this confirms to me, I don't have to have a deer kill. This confirms to me that everything I'm doing is right.
Yep.
Every decision I'm making, how I'm hunting, it's teaching me that I can do this again and be just as successful.
Right.
So,
isn't it nice to be able to sleep in, Jake, after you've been hunting day after day? And, not you specifically, but, for some guys, they're really pushing hard, and isn't it nice to be able to sleep in and go in your blind at about 10:30 in the morning?
Well, that's a pretty nice time. Take your shower about 10 and get all cleaned up, do my scent control stuff. Takes about a half an hour to slowly walk back in there and get in my blind. And yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
No wind, the body heat keeps me pretty warm in there. So
and not roughing it at all, I'm telling you.
No. Yeah.
So then on Wednesday, November 20, which would be 8 days later, snow is starting to melt. You went out there again.
Right. I hadn't been there since, but again, we had the weather conditions were right. Post cold front, high pressure. I seldom ever hunt this plot without high pressure. And the best hunting times gave it a 2-buck day. But the greatest part of that was we had a 1:46 p.m. to 2:46, so just after noon, but way before dark, we had a minor feeding period, and that is because we had a setting moon at 2:15 p.m. that day. So that means what they're doing is they're telling you for a half an hour before that period and a half an hour after that period, a full hour, they feel there should be some deer activity during that time of the day. And I thought, I'm going to go in there and hunt that during the middle of the day and just see what I'll see. And I was text messaging you and letting you know, hey, I'm in, this is what it looks like. And my gosh, it seems like it was literally 1:45, and I look up and I just see deer streaming out of the cover.
And really, it's almost like man, this normally happens within the last hour of daylight.
Yeah, this is what you're going to expect at 5 p.m. with it getting dark at 6 at this time of night.
Right.
But instead, here it is. It's 1:45, so it's 1:45 p.m. basically just after noon, and I got deer coming out of the cover like it's an hour before dark. and it was just a colossal hunt. Lots of does, fawns, bucks of different age class. Here's just one view out of my one side window. I don't know if you add them up. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think there's 11 deer in that picture.
Actually, I counted. Yeah, right. I counted. I thought 12, but anyway.
Maybe there's 12, and then there's one trying to get into my water tub, which is frozen. But
Hmm.
because it was thawing, there was little pools of water in some of the depressions in that ice, and you got deer over there licking that water.
Yeah.
And again, that's just one side of my view. The other side of the plot looked just the same. There was
Yeah.
another.
So this would be the right side of the
Yep.
plot, and this is
Yep.
the left side of the plot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, just amazing. Just
And
amazing.
year and a halfs and 2.5s were just in and out along with different doe groups. So it would, most of the time the deer spend 15, 20 minutes and they move out. They fill their stomach, and now they're going to go lay down and chew their cud.
Hmm.
But some young bucks would come out, and it was a lot of activity during that entire event. And I had a real nice 2.5-year-old that I've been watching. He's pretty broke up, but he came up and he worked a scrape. And of course, this is still November 20th, so there's still some rut going on, and he's trying to, hey, look at me, boys. I'm making a scrape. I'm bad dog.
Hmm.
But he's an awesome up and comer. What a great buck he'll be next year.
Yeah.
You know.
And what I like, I mean, look at the food on here. I
Yeah.
mean, look at it's just, I mean, unbelievable amounts of food in this plot. Yeah.
Man, there's a lot of food in that plot.
And for most guys, their brassica plots have already been eaten down to stubble.
That brassica was in that 24 to 30-inch height by October 1st this year.
Wow.
So man, I mean, the God looked down on me favorably. And
Yeah.
there's a picture of that 2.5 out in the field eating, and he picked his head up, and you can see he's broke his G2s and off
yeah.
on the opposite side, but he's
Yeah.
got a broken G3 on his left and broke the 2s and 3s off on his right side. But yeah, he's going to be a good deer.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really, and here he came over and he's licking the ice.
Yeah.
So again, you can see my pictures that I take through my foggy windows, because it's just a lot of work, and that water tub is 10 yards from my blind.
Right.
And anybody who's aware of deer vision, you take a squeegee and move that squeegee on that window, and they pick that right up. So
Man. Yeah.
it's very treacherous trying to clean those windows when deer are close to you.
Yeah.
So consequently, I don't clean them and they get fogged up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not worth spooking them, Jake.
It isn't, because my whole goal is to keep that location very fresh.
Yeah.
And then the very next time I hunted it, 9 days later. So just the setup, you can see, even though I've got a great location, it's secluded. I'm hunting it every 8 to 10
Mhm.
days. Okay, so I consider that light hunting. Okay,
Hmm.
but I'm thinking, what? I got some nice bucks on camera. I just want to see what's going to happen. So a week ago, yeah, day after Thanksgiving, had a great day with all my family on Thanksgiving, and they're like, you going hunting? I said, no. I said, I might tomorrow. I said, things look better tomorrow. So anyways, I get back in there for very similar reasons. We've got a moon major period from 2:20 p.m. to 4:20 p.m. And what that means is we've got a moon overhead at 3:20. So when it's a major period, they give you an hour before and an hour after.
Hmm.
Where if it's a minor period, they kind of give you a half an hour before and a half an hour after, less effect.
Yep.
But the thing is, it can still be just as effective. So I get in there on the 29th. Again, similar conditions. We did have high pressure. I think the temperature was like in the mid 30s, 34, 36 degrees. You can see in the picture, no snow. It's funny to see this now with the 3 different hunts. See how the food is getting less and less?
Yeah, it's getting shorter.
Getting shorter. So these deer must be spending a lot of time in here. And sure enough, I got in early, and I was going up the stand, climbing, and I've got very secure access. And I've got a one-antlered buck that hangs out quite a bit in this area. And he's a 2-year-old that broke it off fighting early in the season. But anyways, he was already in the field, and I was, that's another, you were telling earlier about how I can climb up that ladder, open that door, get in. I was able to do that, and he never was spooked and continued to feed. He heard me bump the door, and he looked at the blind, and I just waited and waited him out, gave him 5-10 minutes. And once he got busy feeding and forgot about me, then I shut that door and made that little bit of noise. He didn't care.
Hmm.
And you can see the deer trails in that food, huh?
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
You know, and I went through this food plot this year. Oh, right. It was early October. I was going to mow trails like I did in the soybeans last year. And I thought, oh, I hate to mow all that food, but I went ahead and did it. And man, you know, it was it clearly was a good idea. And so these deer started using these trails that I mowed through those brassicas.
And your blind right here, just so people know, your
Yep,
blind is right behind this big pine tree right here.
yep, right there.
Yep.
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 And there's the scrape tree out in front, the cedar tree.
Yep. Yep.
So it was again, you know, it was Friday the 29th. Yeah, there's the one antlered buck and another buck out there feeding. And it was again just like somebody hit a switch and deer just started coming out of the covers. Deer
Mm-hmm.
coming from the north, deer coming from the west, deer coming from the east. Had a few come in from the south, and you can see there looking through the foggy. But there's a couple of bucks there, and yeah, the deer were coming in. I mean, it was really good, and I kept seeing does and fawns and young bucks and 2-year-olds, and the coolest thing was is as it was a great hunt, you know. And I think I was text messaging it pictures, right?
Yeah.
Just
Right.
like the last time. And I kept saying, well, I got time. Still no shooters yet. And the awesome part was at about 9 minutes after 4, which is still well within that major feeding period, one of my target bucks that I had not laid eyes on in quite some time, way over a month, enters the field.
Yep. And
And
Jake, I think he had been wounded by one of your neighbors now, right?
yep, one of my neighbors had shot at him with a bow. You know, people make decisions, but anyways, it wasn't a good decision. And fortunately for that deer, he was not wounded very bad. It was a leg hit. It had all healed up. I didn't know this until after I had a chance to get a better look at him. But he walked out into the field, and I got just a little bit of video. I got just a little bit, and I said, "Oh man, that's that big 8-point Palomino." I'm thinking, you know, that deer's for sure 3.5, probably 4.5. I've had him around a few years. He's had kind of a random pattern, but hey, he got a lot of pressure and he got wounded, so it made him pretty random, you know. But here it is, again, two hours before dark, and he's marching out into a wide open field like that, and he's feeding. So he gets behind that cedar tree, and I can't see him. And I mean, he's behind that cedar tree, and I'm watching all these other deer, and you know, a minute seems like an hour, but I mean, several minutes go by. And so actually, he probably marches in at about 5 minutes to 4. Oh my gosh, I see an antler, I see a back, you know, maybe that's him. And so I tried to get my video camera to video him marching out, because I'm sitting in the blind on this day, which is our Michigan firearm season, with my muzzleloader, 50 caliber Thompson Center. Anyways, I tried to focus, and all it was blur, you know. And two things were going on. Because I had deer in front of me, I couldn't squeegee the windows. My camera was in the corner. It hadn't been opened in quite some time. So between the fogged up windows, and then when I turn on my camera, the little plastic shutter that's in front of the lens, that opens up, and of course my lens fogs up. And I can't get, you know, I think I sent you a little clip. It's just a foggy mess. And so I go, you know what? I'm not going to be able to get any video of him walking out. I'm not going to be able to hopefully get the shot on video. So I just turned it off, pushed it in the corner, and said, okay, I'm going to open the window and see if I can get a shot here. And the truth is I did. And at 10 minutes after 4, it was maybe a 30-yard shot. He made it just past where that one buck is standing, right there by the cedar tree, and piled up under that apple tree. And just a super nice, big, heavy 8-point, just a great deer. So I'm so blessed to, number one, have the property. I work hard on the property to make these situations happen, but I want everybody that's watching this to realize that you too can do this.
Yep.
And self-discipline is probably the number one determining factor. Yeah, the deer were there, and I had the habitat and the food, and that's, hey, anybody can do that, but it's very hard for people to stay out. I mean,
Yep.
hey, I was getting daylight photos of this buck, but I wasn't out there hunting him every day.
Right.
Okay? Yeah.
Yep. And you're not
And
in
that,
there checking trail cameras and
yeah.
walking around the plot seeing, I wonder if there's a scrape over there. You know, I'm
No,
going to go
I
check
mean,
it out.
I will tell you, I have not walked around the edge of that food plot at all since I overseeded it with rye back in mid-September. That was the last time I was walking around in there
Yep.
until I went to retrieve that buck.
Yep.
So
Exactly. I've heard people tell me who know you and have seen some of your bucks that you shot and seen some of the videos you've put out, and they just chalk it up to, well, that's just Jake's property. I could never do that on mine because, it's not the same as Jake's property. Well, and you're kind of modest about this, Jake, so I'm just going to come right out and say it. And that is, you didn't have anything going for your property, way back when in 1981 when you bought it. I mean, wide open fields, and most of the trees we've seen in this webinar so far are everything you've planted. So you have the habitat, yes, you have, but you've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and you have figured it out. And I've been very fortunate to walk your property with you, and we always do a postseason scouting every year, and we find out what deer like and what they don't like and what changes need to be made. And I've been pretty fortunate to be able to like follow along with you on your property as it progresses. And so but here's the thing, you don't have any magical pixie dust on your property.
no,
You don't have any
nope,
magical water on your property. It's a pretty level piece of ground. There's not much topographical changes in it, which
nope,
for some people can be a disadvantage. But the one thing you do have that is you've got no fences, and you have a lot of brown and down hunters,
yeah,
and the deer still like to be on your property, and that's because you don't overhunt it. And
yeah,
if somebody had, I mean, if you were to sell that property in the near future to somebody that would not hunt it with the caution that you do, and just go in there and increase their hunting activity more than you, say 50-70%, it would turn that property into another average hunting property.
right. It would just be another Michigan property, just like the one directly across the road from me, or
Yep.
you know, uh, absolutely.
Yep.
It doesn't take long to force those deer out. Deer are going to spend time, especially once the guns and the orange coats come out, where it's safe.
Yep.
People use the term sanctuary, safe zone, whatever you want to call it. They're only going to be where they know they aren't going to get in trouble.
Right.
And I spend the entire year building, giving those deer everything they have to make sure that during this time of the year, nobody else is in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be quite disappointing when your trail camera finds trespassers that didn't call you and ask you to trail deer, and they're going through your sanctuary. It's like, what in the heck is going on here? And so, you learn about people, but the truth is the cover is so good that these deer just move out of those people's way and still don't leave, because they know it's the place to go. And there's so many different locations for them to bed that it's just, you've been in it. They're
Oh,
extremely thick, and they didn't get thick by accident.
no,
No,
no, no.
no, no,
Yep.
no. A
So,
lot of chainsaw chips
yeah,
because of
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, how does somebody go about skyrocketing their deer sightings all season with quality bucks? And again, the number one way to do it, and I don't care how good or bad or whatever your habitat is, if you don't have the discipline to stay away from high percentage areas when conditions don't line up, you're going to experience a situation where you're not going to attract the deer to pile into your property when other properties are being gun hunted with extreme pressure. And that's when you'll know if you've got good habitat and you've got good hunting practices with keeping the pressure low, because as the season moves on, you really should be able to start drawing in more deer to your property.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this a lot. I've got a resident deer herd that I follow, from early spring, what you call spring breakup, when all the deer kind of spread out and disperse, and does are getting ready to have fawns, and bucks are establishing, social bachelor groups. And that resident deer herd, I get on camera all summer long. And I'll tell you, once gun season starts, I start getting deer that came from, I don't know where they came from. Okay, I got does and fawns and family groups, and it's because I've got the food and the undisturbed cover.
Right.
So
Yep.
anybody can do this. But that discipline is very tough to do.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you've got to have multiple areas of secure and unpressured bedding, and that includes doing your doe bedding areas that can accommodate multiple deer bedding close together. and this would be closer to food. But then if you've got enough acres and you've got enough room on your property, then move away from that food, get in some of the thicker areas, and start creating some of those individual buck beds where multiple deer really can't and won't bed together. And
Right.
because otherwise the does may take that over, and the bucks just don't want to be around the women and kids again.
Right.
So this gives
So,
them a man cave to sit there and kind of bed by themselves.
lots of man caves. That's well said. You've got to have, not 6, not 7, but like 25 to 30 of them.
I mean, you
Now
got to
that
think
doesn't,
out of the box, man.
yeah, and it doesn't mean that you got 25 to 30 bucks, but that's 25 to 30 locations for those 6 to 12 different bucks. Now can go in there and plop down based on wind and conditions and say, yep, I'm
Yep.
going to hang out here today.
Yep.
This is where I'm going to chew my cud and rub a couple of trees.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And then having secure and unpressured deer travel routes. Now, this one can get a little bit, I mean, we could go on and on about this, but
We could.
you've got to have some secure ways for these bucks to move from their beds over to where the girls are bedding and over to food sources and stuff. And, you can't expect them to walk through a big wide open woods that you can see through
No,
100 yards.
no.
They're just not going to do that.
They
No.
aren't exactly. No, so that you've got to have it. Now, I often refer to them, Randy, as arteries of cover. It's a thick band of cover that deer can go from that bedding area that they're comfortable with all the way to that food source that they're comfortable with without exposing themselves in open country.
Yep. Yeah,
And
exactly.
a lot of properties don't have that.
Right. Yep. And then having multiple secure, unpressured food sources like you have. And
Yep.
so you've got some real small micro plots. You've got some, destination plots, but, almost all your plots are hidden, Jake.
They are. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Yep. Most of them are all hidden. And I've got one that you can see from the house, and that's just so Anaya and I can look out the windows and, see what the bucks are doing in the summer and stuff.
Mm.
But even then, the topography has enough change that there's 2 locations where there's little bowls that those deer can feed, and I can't see them.
Right.
So still and those deer know that that's a secluded location. They can go in there and know that nobody can see them. They
Yep.
can't see our yard. They can't see our house, so they're hidden.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you almost can't emphasize this enough, and that is entry and exit to and from hunting locations, whether it's a tree stand, a box blind, ground blind somewhere. I mean, you've got to be able to get in undetected. And so the rule is, I mean, if you don't know if you can get in and out undetected, have somebody stand in the middle of the food plot and then try to get in and out of your stand or blind and see if that person can see you.
Yeah.
And if they can, well, it's not hidden enough or it's too close to the food plot. So you got to move it back, and
Yeah.
that is a really
And
hard pill to swallow.
it's a hard pill to swallow, and it takes a lot of analyzing. And most of the time, you're not going to get it right the first time.
Right.
You're going to be a couple of years working on it. To walk from my walkout basement after I do all my scent control to that box blind, I've really worked to tighten that access up, haven't I?
Oh man.
And I mean,
Yeah,
I planted trees. I got switchgrass. I've got miscanthus grass. I've got sorghum.
Yep.
I mean, I've hidden everywhere I go. The only place those deer can see me is if they're bedded up close to the yard and they can see me in my backyard.
Right.
My wife Anaya keeps it mowed and landscaped, and they're going to see me walking across my backyard. But once I enter my route to the stand, I'm hidden.
Oh yeah.
And it pays huge dividends.
Yeah. You're going through so many different types of, vegetation getting to your, I mean, it seems like a longer walk than what it really is.
Yeah. 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 It's really not that far, but man, there's a lot of change in habitats to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, so again, this is kind of repeated the last slide, but blinds and tree stands must be hidden and seldom hunted. So, one thing that, we both like to do is we'll take some Christmas tree branches that don't deteriorate, artificial Christmas tree branches, and, put those around some of our ladder stands, hang-ons, just spots in the tree where we're going to be hunting so that there's a blob there,
Absolutely.
365 days a year.
Yes.
Yeah.
That ladder stand or that hang-on stand, now that all the leaves are gone, and then there's a guy in it. Well, those deer walk by that stand for a week, and they can kind of see through it. Now all of a sudden there's a blob there, man. Especially now
Hmm.
that we're into gun season, these deer know all about that blob in the sky.
Yep, yep. And
So
I think somebody had a pretty good saying, deer in Michigan are born looking up and walking
yeah,
backwards.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So those artificial Christmas trees are, man, those work good. I've had them on some of my stands way over 10, 12 years now, maybe 15 years on some of those
they
stands.
still
Yeah,
look like they did when you put them up there.
they do. The thing is, they're pretty hardy.
Yeah. And then, getting to your stands, scent control is something that's hard for a lot of guys to do. So if you're in that group, it's really important to know where your scent is drifting as you're making your way to your stand setup. And, that's why Jake, you always talk about that northwest wind, because you're walking right into the wind to that box
Yeah,
line.
for the most part, my scent is drifting where I just walked.
Right.
And so it's not going into any bedding areas. It's not going into a food source where there might be other deer. And again, that's why I have decided, based on my experience, that it's going to be northwest wind that I hunt that plot,
Yep.
or a northerly. It could be slightly northeast. Could
Right.
be. Yep.
Yep. And so it's so important that even if you had a post cold front and you had the moon position lined up, and the temperatures were, the wind was low and whatnot, but
Yep.
if you've got a south wind or a southeast wind, you just aren't
Well,
going to go there.
I don't go in there
No,
because
because
number one, my scent is going to drift to the east of where I'm walking.
Yep.
And that's where I've got deer bedding. I know they're bedding in there. So number
Yep.
one, I'm gonna alert them walking in. And yeah, so why do that?
Right.
Why? My goal is to have that buck, which I killed. I'm sure he successfully walked into that food plot prior to that many times during daylight and fed, because he knew it was a place he could do that.
Mm-hmm.
He never ever smelt humans.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep. And so, you just can't force the issue.
no,
You want to
no,
hunt that one spot so bad,
no.
and everything lines up, but the wind is wrong. Well, sorry, it just you
And again,
pick a different stand.
yeah, and I want to remind, we're talking about people that are landowners that have a fairly small property.
Right.
This isn't, if you've got 18 different properties to hunt, well, that's a different story. Okay.
Yeah.
But this is the only place I hunt. So I can't go in here and screw it up, because that's going to ruin my hunting going into the season. So that's why I'm really tough on myself about how often.
Yep, that's a really good point you make, Jake, because I think there's YouTube is got a lot of really cool videos, channels to follow, like the hunting public.
Oh yeah, those are great guys.
Great guys. I mean, they go after it hard, but
They do.
it's a whole different ball game from what you're going through, because they might hunt
completely different.
Yeah, I mean, there's other guys too that will go in there without any scent control, and it's a totally different situation, because they might only hunt that stand in the swamp one time.
Yeah.
And if they booger it up with scent, well, big deal, because tomorrow they're going to be in a totally different spot, maybe 50 miles away.
Yep. They're going to go somewhere else, and maybe they'll come back 3 weeks later, give it another shot. But it's not like owning that small little place where you've got kind of a controlled local deer group, and you're competing with your neighbors and their poor hunting methods and et cetera. So
yeah, exactly. So good scent control if you're a landowner, like you said, especially with a small piece of property. The smaller it is, the smaller your margin of error is going to be. And so it's just one of those things that comes with having a good, successful, quality hunt for the whole season.
It does. Scent control, people they love it, hate it. Anybody who's been successful with it loves it.
yeah, exactly. And I guess the last thing I'll say about that is trail cams are great. I tell you, it's a great toy. It's fun to open up a trail cam and it says your card is full, and it's like, oh boy, what am I going to see on this card? And but man, it can be such a negative in so many properties that I see, that it's just curiosity kills the cat, right, Jake?
It does. I would say I see way more misuse of trail cameras on properties that I visit than people that use them correctly.
Yeah.
And again, they're their own worst enemy. You can't be putting a camera in a place that you're going to be seen, smelt, heard. I run cameras but you've seen where I put them. They're in places that are easy to get to. They're not in the cover. They're not where I hunt.
Yep.
It's like that food plot that I hunt.
How many trail cams you got on that food plot, Jake?
Yeah, I have none. And there's a reason I have none. I don't ever want to be there. You and I both know how you can have that one deer that knows that trail camera's there. And even with black flash, I've used them all. And every once in a while, you've got a deer. And so it just goes to show I'm not willing to take chances. I can get my information 100 yards away on a scrape on the edge of a food plot where I'm walking pepper once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can get all the information I need from that one. And it's letting me know if these deer are around here. And that's all, because I know I got the spot for them.
Yeah. Right.
So
yeah. I mean, it's predictable as sunrise that they're going to be in that food plot.
Trail cameras are awesome. And again, how deer react to trail cameras and human scent in Kansas compared to southern Michigan.
Exactly.
I mean, it's two totally different. It's not even apples and oranges. It's just so different.
Yeah, I really I envy Lee Lakosky. He's got cameras everywhere, and they're right at waist high, and he puts them right in their face, right? And the deer walk up to them and say, "Oh, yeah, there's one of those little boxes again." But man, in Michigan, can you imagine on a 3 or 4 year old buck, how many cameras has that animal seen by the time he reaches 3 or 4 years of age in Michigan? Maybe 100, 150.
Randy, it's hard to say, but everybody's running cameras. Okay?
Right. And the common thread to most of these cameras in the woods is that there's usually a human scent trail going to it, or, the fabric strap is just, absorb these odors from your car, your truck, your barn, your garage. I mean, the strap smells worse than the camera does.
I know a year or two ago, you did a pretty cool little webinar about a camera that you had set on your property that you owned there in Lake County for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you had done something. You set it down low, but man, you had deer checking that camera out like crazy.
Yeah.
Because they could smell. They could smell you, right?
And 20 hours later, I mean, you look at the date and the timestamp, 20 hours later, those deer were still freaking out.
Yeah. Yep.
It was incredible. I mean, they were smelling the twigs that I brushed up against with my pant leg.
That right there tells y'all everything you need to know about a Michigan whitetail.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess if you have to run them, I always, tell my clients, hey, if you can use a cell cam or wireless and use a black flash, and then by all means, don't put it at waist high, put that thing up at least 10 feet, just get one section of climbing stick.
Yep.
Just step up on it. You're good at 10 feet, 12 feet.
That's all you need. Just one section, climb up and hang it.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So
you can take your stick down and everything's good.
Yeah. It only takes an extra 15 seconds.
I was going to say it's pretty quick.
Yeah. It's really quick. So, well, Jake, and we went a little bit longer than I hoped, but man, I really hope this thing is helped some guys maybe connect some dots and maybe verify some things that they've been doing right or maybe doing wrong. And
I hope so too. I love to see people be successful, and I know you're exactly the same way. And if somebody watching this picked a couple of nuggets and says, you know what, I'm gonna change my entry a little bit, and I'm gonna start watching that weather, and I'm gonna pay attention to that moon position, you're gonna be surprised that person that's listening to me right now, how good that's gonna treat you when you start looking at 3, 4, 5 years down the road, how consistently that's gonna work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. So you're getting into that busy time of year, Jake, where your calendar's starting to fill up. Hey,
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm. Here we are. 3 weeks left in December, and I'll probably be pretty much booked full by January 1st, which pretty much has happened for the last 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And I imagine you are too, right? You're getting a lot of requests. And
December's full. January is almost full. So like you say, once you get once a hunting season's done, guys really turn their attention to habitat, and boy, the email and phone start blowing up, and it's not long you're booked solid through May and June. So. Yeah. Anyway,
I always enjoy the habitat season and helping people out, and getting that, whether it's the photograph or text message or email of the success, whatever level of success. And gosh, a lot of my own clients, and I know probably the same for you, have killed some of their best bucks ever this year.
Oh man.
And fantastic. I just love to see it.
Very gratifying to be a part of that, ain't it?
It really is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. They always say, when you're dead and gone, you can't take anything with you. But if you can make an impact in somebody's life, then hey, I've done the best I can. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
yeah,
So, hey, what can we say?
yeah.
I think we probably have one of the best jobs out there.
Oh, we do.
If you're
Yeah.
into hunting.
Yeah,
Yep.
it
You
really is.
bet.
It's great. It's a great job. So,
Yep. All right, Jake. Well, hey, this was fun. We'll have to do this again on a
yeah.
different
Yep.
topic
Yep.
again, and hopefully, if you got anything out of this, and maybe you want Jake or I to visit your property, the information's right there. And if you like the video, comment below, give us a thumbs up.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
until the next video, Jake,
Yep.
we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Be sure to like and subscribe. Right.
You betcha.
Yeah.
You bet.
Okay. All right. See you later, Randy.
See you, Jake.
Yep. Bye.
Bye bye.